My name is Munya, and I'll be your chemistry teacher. So today we like you have seen on the course outline. Our first topic that we're going to be discussing about this coming term is asking questions or asking scientific questions. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that we can go through the notes together as we discuss. So now in science. Science is about asking questions, or when we talk about science, the first and the most important thing is to be able to ask a question. Um, so everything, every scientific theory, or every scientific experiment, or every scientific observation begins by asking a question. There are so many questions that scientists can ask. Um, For example, we can from my textbook there, you can see a question that says, "How do fossil fuels form?" So fossil fuels, these are the normal hydrocarbon fuels that we use. For example, petrol, diesel, coal, natural gas. So those are examples of fossil fuels. So a scientist can ask, how do these fuels form? All right. And then after asking such a question of how do fossil fuels form, the question will then lead to another, or we then start investigating how do these fuels form. So what this first lesson is all about is for you to understand that science is all about asking a question. After you ask a question, then you start investigating about that particular question. So when asking scientific questions, the normal words we use are why is it like this, or what, when, and where. So we usually use why, when, what, and where to ask scientific questions. So what happens is that for you to, how do you, we now want to look at how do you develop a question. So a question develops from an idea, or it develops from a problem. All right. So once we have a problem, or once we have an idea, then we can develop the problem or the idea into a question. For example, we were talking about how do fossil fuels form. All right. So that is a question. And then if we try to look at the origin of that question, it may be from the fact that there was a problem, or we're having a problem with fuels. All right. The world is having a shortage of fossil fuels. And then one would ask a question, how do these fossil fuels form? Or it can originate from an idea. All right. You're thinking, or maybe you just have an idea of fossil fuels to say fossil fuels are very very important, or they have a very vital use or a vital role in our day-to-day lives. So you may wonder, how do these fossil fuels form? So a question develops from an idea, or it develops from a problem. All right. So once we have a problem, a societal problem, then we can develop a scientific question. Right? For example, I'll talk of another example. We are in the coronavirus pandemic era. All right, it is a problem, and then we can ask so many scientific questions regarding that. Right? So maybe I can leave the floor to you, maybe to tell me which scientific questions can you ask about the coronavirus. It's a problem, all right? And then obviously from the problem we are saying we can ask scientific questions. So which questions can you ask regarding the problem, the coronavirus pandemic?
We can ask like, how can we cure it?
Uh-huh. That's correct. Number one, how can we cure the coronavirus? Yes. What else?
How we can, how it started.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Number two, we can.
Um,
Huh?
we could also say, what would be the best medicine to give to reduce it from spreading.
Okay. Yes. How can you stop its transmission? Yes. And then
You should also try and use the words what, when, how, when, etc. You can go on with your questions.
What it actually does.
Okay, what has it done? All right. Any other? Or we can move on.
I can't think of any more.
All right, that's fine. So those are very good questions that you have brought up. So now I'm sure you understand that when we're talking about the coronavirus, it's a global pandemic. All right. So and we as scientists we have to develop ways or we have to develop maybe means of eradicating the virus. So now it brings about a lot of scientific questions. All right. How, like you said, how did it start? Right? Because for we have a problem now, so a problem develops many scientific questions. How did it started, and then how is it transmitted? Right? How can we cure it? Like you were saying. So those are some of the questions that we can ask. So like we say, so I'm sure you're now appreciating that a question is developed from an idea, or a question is developed from a problem. So now, once we have
Yeah.
a question then leads us into what we call an investigation. We then start investigating. I like one of your questions, which
Yeah.
is how did it started? Like how did the coronavirus start? So after asking that question, the next step that a scientist takes is to start investigating. Right? So we know that the virus started in Wuhan. So the first thing you then go to Wuhan and then start investigating how did it start, or what was the epicenter and stuff like that. All right. Or you also ask the fact that how is it cured? Right. So you then start to look for these medicines and then start testing them, or start looking for vaccines and then start carrying out trials. All right, so that we can find a cure to that. So
Yeah.
now after it leads us to an investigation, it then takes us to the next phase, which is what is a variable. All right. So now,
Yeah.
when carrying out a scientific investigation, you always have what are called variables. Right? You always have what are called variables. Variables, these are factors. These are factors. So here we have a definition of a variable. So anything that can affect or that might affect the outcome of an investigation is called a variable. All right. So now we were talking about the coronavirus, COVID-19. All right. And then you ask the question. Let's look at the question: how is it treated? So if you look at the question, how is it treated? It leads us into an investigation. Where we start investigating how is the virus treated. So when investigating such, there are factors that can affect the outcome of the investigation, right? For example, when we look at how can it be treated, we are looking at factors such as temperature. They affect the outcome. Age affect the outcome. All right. Sex can affect the outcome. All right. You can see maybe when specifically when talking, let's talk about the coronavirus. You can see that it's the factors that are affecting the rate at which it is spreading or the rate at which it is killing. You have age. All right. You have maybe the temperature or the climate of the region, and then you might also have diseases. Like if someone has got respiratory diseases, all right, they will obviously there are factors that affect the outcome or the factors that affect our results. So when carrying out an investigation, factors that affect the outcome or factors that affect our results, we refer to those ones as variables. Now we have an example that is there that I'm sharing on my screen. So I've got a wonderful gentleman holding a tennis ball. The example is saying that Tom watches a tennis match, and then new tennis balls are brought out from a refrigerator during the match. Here are some questions that Katie and Tom might investigate. All right. So we're saying we have a scenario here whereby Tom is watching tennis, the tennis match, and then new tennis balls are brought out from the refrigerator during the match, right? So now we can ask questions. Number one, how does the size of a ball affect how high it bounces? And then we can also ask a question, how does temperature of a ball affect how high it bounces? So these are two questions that we can ask from an idea. All right, we have an idea. You're watching a tennis match, right, and then new tennis balls are brought out from a refrigerator. Right, so definitely, if they're coming out of a refrigerator, they definitely have a lower temperature. If they have a lower temperature, it will definitely may affect how they bounce. So now we are saying that if you look at the second question, how does the temperature of a ball affect how high it bounces? All right. So if a tennis ball or a ball has got a low temperature, its bouncing can be reduced or it can be increased. So we can now carry out an investigation, all right, to see how does temperature affect the bouncing of a tennis ball. Temperature can affect the bouncing of a tennis ball. All right. So since it affects the bouncing of a tennis ball, we now refer to it as a variable because it's affecting the outcome of an investigation. So now we have two types of variables. We have an independent variable and we have a dependent variable. So for now, what you just need to know is that we have two types of a variable. We have an independent variable and we have a dependent variable. And then we will discuss in detail about these variables later on. Our next task is I want you guys to develop questions. So I'm going to give you a problem. I'm going to give you a problem. And then after I give you the problem, you are going to investigate about that problem and then give me feedback and then just tell me questions that we can ask regarding that particular problem. We have a problem of water pollution, right? Water pollution is a problem. It is a global problem, all right? People are polluting water, all right? They are disposing plastics, they are disposing chemicals that are hazardous into water bodies, right? So water pollution by chemicals is a global problem because some animals will end up drinking the contaminated water and then they die. So most industries are disposing chemicals or they are polluting uh, rivers and dams using chemicals. So what questions can we ask regarding the problem water pollution? All right, so I'm going to give you 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes each one of you is going to give us so I want you to maybe probably develop at least 5 questions regarding the problem of water pollution, and then you're going to give me feedback at 8:40. I did not take breakdown. Okay, you can give me feedback now.
Okay, so my first question was how can we stop it?
Okay, how can we stop water pollution? Yes, that's a very good question. The second one.
My second one was how is the water being polluted?
Okay, how is water being polluted? That's a very good question. Yes. Third one.
My third one is why is it a problem?
That's a very interesting question.
If pollution carries on like this, how long can we live?
All right, that's a very important question, an interesting one. I love that one. Yes. Fourth one.
How many animals will it kill?
All right, yeah, that's okay. Last one.
How will you clean the water once it's been polluted?
Right, how do you clean water once it gets polluted? That's fine. So we will stop there today. So you see, science begins by asking a question. So we're now concluding the lesson. Science begins by asking the question. All right.
Once we have the question, we can start carrying out an investigation. So all scientific investigations in chemistry begin by asking a question. Thank you for that one. Yes?
When did it start? Like, when did water pollution start?
All right, when did it start? All right, yeah. Then the fifth,
The fifth one is, what measures can we take to stop it?
precisely. Those are very, very good questions and very important questions. Thank you, Cindy. I really like that. All right. Thank you so much for the feedback. Rowan, you're next.
My first question is, how long will it take to reverse the cycle?
How long will it take to what?
To reverse the cycle.
Reverse the cycle. Okay, which cycle are you talking about?
Like unpollute the water.
Okay, so you can say how long will it take? Okay, how long will it take to reverse water pollution? Maybe okay, that's fine. We get that. The next one.
Why is pollution such a bad problem?
Okay, why is pollution such a bad problem? All right, that's fine. Third one.